the smell reached the British frigate before the ship did. Captain Ogle stood at the rail, watching the pirate vessel drift closer. His men had been tracking her for weeks. Now, finally, she was within cannon range. But something was wrong. No movement on deck. No crew scrambling to battle stations. Just a ship rolling gently in the Caribbean swell, her sails hanging slack. When the boarding party climbed over the gunwale, they found the answer. Bodies. Everywhere. Men who had been alive 3 weeks ago now lay rotting in the tropical sun. Dysentery had torn through the crew like grape shot. 60 men, reduced to 11 survivors, too weak to stand. The ship's surgeon would later write that the vessel smelled like death itself had taken up residence in the hold. This was not unusual. Royal Navy vessels lost entire crews to disease. Merchant ships arrived in port with half their complement dead. The phrase ship fever entered medical vocabulary because so many men died of it aboard vessels with trained surgeons, dedicated hospital bays, and regulations governing every aspect of shipboard hygiene. Yet somehow, the most successful pirate fleets kept sailing. Blackbeard terrorized the Atlantic for years. Bartholomew Roberts captured over 400 ships. Henry Morgan crossed the Caribbean and sacked Panama City. Their crews lived in conditions that should have been death sentences. No surgeons, no regulations, no sanitation systems of any kind. Watch until the end, and you will discover the accidental genius that kept pirate ships from becoming floating coffins. Why a wooden box at the bow was worth more than gold. How rum saved more lives than any medicine. And the man whose only job was scrubbing filth as punishment for telling lies. This is the story nobody tells about the golden age of piracy. The disgusting, brilliant truth about how the dirtiest men on the ocean stayed alive. Let us begin with numbers that should terrify you. A typical pirate sloop carried 60 men. Some larger vessels held 200. Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge carried nearly 300 at her peak. These men lived in spaces designed for cargo. They slept in shifts because there were not enough hammocks. They ate elbow to elbow in darkness below deck. They breathed air that had passed through dozens of other lungs. Now consider what the human body produces. Every man generates roughly a pound of waste daily. Multiply that by 60 men. Multiply that by 30 days at sea. Nearly a ton of biological material that needs to go somewhere. Add the vomit from seasickness, the blood from wounds, the discharge from injuries that festered in tropical heat, the sweat of men working in Caribbean sun without fresh water to wash. One case of cholera should cascade through such a crew in days. One man with dysentery should infect everyone who touched the same ropes, the same food, the same provisions. The mathematics demanded mass death. Yet pirate fleets kept sailing. How? 2018. Marine archaeologists working the wreck of Queen Anne's Revenge pull an artifact from the seafloor, a wooden seat with a hole cut through it. Not treasure, not weapons, not the kind of discovery that makes headlines. Just a simple piece of furniture that had been sitting in salt water for 300 years. This was what sailors called a seat of ease, the toilet, the place where Blackbeard himself sat while contemplating his next raid. Archaeologists found it in the stern section, near what would have been the captain's quarters. Officers got private facilities. But this single artifact revealed something crucial about how the ship functioned. There was a system, a primitive, disgusting, remarkably effective system. Every pirate ship had a structure at the bow called the beakhead, a platform extending forward beyond the hull, supported by heavy timbers, positioned directly above open ocean. This was the head, the toilet, the most important sanitation device ever designed for ships at sea. The name stuck. To this day, bathrooms on vessels are called heads, not because sailors were crude, because the facility was located at the head of the ship, the most forward point, the place where waves constantly crashed against the hull. The design was elegantly simple: wooden planks with gaps between them, sometimes a proper box with holes cut into the seat. Below, nothing but churning Atlantic. Whatever fell through those gaps disappeared into the ocean instantly. No accumulation, no festering pools, no concentration of the bacteria that killed crews on other vessels. The sea received everything and diluted it into harmlessness within seconds. Here is what made the positioning brilliant. Ships sailed with wind behind them. The bow pointed into the direction of travel. Wind constantly blew from stern to bow, pushing all odors away from the crew quarters and off the ship entirely. A man using the head had wind at his back. The smell carried forward, over the bowsprit, gone. Compare this to facilities placed at the stern, where odors would blow back across the entire deck, poisoning the air that everyone breathed. Pirates understood nothing about germ theory. They could not have explained bacterial transmission or fecal contamination. But they understood wind. They understood that the front of the ship smelled better than anywhere else. They built their toilets where physics demanded, and physics kept them alive. Using the head was not for the timid. In calm Caribbean waters, the platform sat perhaps 5 feet above the surface. Manageable. Hold the bowsprit, do your business, return to duties. But calm seas were rare. In rough weather, waves exploded over the beakhead continuously. The platform became slick with spray. The bowsprit bucked as the ship climbed swells and crashed into troughs. Men had to grip railings with both hands while managing clothing and bodily functions simultaneously. Sailors washed overboard while using the facilities. One moment squatting over the gaps, the next moment swept into the Atlantic by a rogue wave. Gone. No rescue possible. Ships could not turn back for men lost to misadventures at the head. Records exist of men struck from below by waves while seated. One account describes a purser on a naval vessel who sat down during a storm. A wave forced air up through the opening with such violence that it lacerated his body and drove wind into his abdomen. He required medical treatment for injuries sustained while trying to relieve himself. The head was a daily reminder that the sea was always trying to kill you. Now for the detail that truly separates that age from our comfortable present. There was no toilet paper. Instead, sailors used what they called a tow rag, a piece of hemp rope, frayed at the end, dangling through the hole in the seat down toward the water below. After finishing, you hauled up the wet rope, used it to clean yourself, and dropped it back into the ocean. The same rope, used by every man on the ship, day after day, week after week. The theory was simple. The rope hung in seawater continuously. Waves washed it. Salt cleaned it. By the time the next man needed it, the ocean had done its work. The reality was less pristine, but it worked well enough that the practice continued for centuries. From Spanish galleons to British frigates, sailors cleaned themselves with communal ropes that had touched every man aboard. This should have been a perfect disease transmission method. Sometimes it was, but constant washing, saltwater exposure, and tropical sun apparently disrupted bacterial growth enough to prevent the worst outcomes. Someone had to clean the head. In the Royal Navy, this job fell to a man with an unfortunate title, the liar. Not because he was dishonest, because the position was punishment. The rule worked like this. The first man caught telling a lie on Monday morning was publicly identified at the mainmast. The entire crew would shout the accusation in unison. For the rest of the week, that man cleaned the heads. Not the regular scrubbing that all sailors performed, the deep cleaning, scraping accumulated filth from planks, removing anything that failed to fall through the gaps, ensuring the platform remained usable. Miserable work, humiliating work, and powerful motivation for honesty. Tell the truth, or spend your week covered in evidence of other men's digestion. Pirate ships likely had their own variations. Their democratic articles specified duties and punishments. Someone always drew the short straw. Someone always dealt with what everyone else left behind. The head was not the only option. For quick urination, ships provided pissdales, simple tubes or funnels positioned along the rails. A man could relieve his bladder without the dangerous trek to the bow. The tubes extended through the hull, draining directly into the sea. No collection, no storage, just continuous disposal. The chains were another alternative, platforms extending from the ship's sides, outside the hull, where a man could hang over the water and let gravity work. More exposed than the head, more dangerous in weather, but available when the bow was crowded. Officers had entirely different arrangements. Captains' cabins often included private facilities in the stern gallery, a closet with a seat over an opening in the hull, privacy that common sailors never knew. Some officers had chamber pots, porcelain vessels kept in quarters for nighttime use, emptied overboard each morning. The hierarchy of bodily functions mirrored every other hierarchy aboard ship. Every ship had a bilge, the lowest part of the hull, where water collected constantly. Ships leaked, all of them. Oak planks swelled and shrank with temperature. Caulking worked loose. Seawater found every gap, every crack, every imperfection. It pooled in the bilge, mixing with whatever fell from above. Food scraps, spilled rum, rat droppings, blood from butchered livestock, and sometimes human waste from men too sick or drunk to reach the head. The bilge was legendary for its horror. The smell could knock a man unconscious. Bilge fever killed thousands over the centuries. But here is the paradox. Ships needed constant pumping. If water accumulated, vessels became unstable. Eventually, they sank. So crews pumped every watch, every day. Wooden bailers and hand pumps moving water overboard without end. This constant pumping accidentally created sanitation. Whatever fell into the bilge was diluted with seawater. Whatever accumulated was pumped overboard within hours. The bilge never became truly stagnant because survival required continuous circulation. Compare this to later vessels with enclosed cargo holds and deep bilges accessible only through hatches. Those ships allowed contamination to build for months. Their bilges became toxic cesspools. Bilge fever devastated 19th century navies. Pirate sloops were simple vessels, shallow drafts, accessible bilges. Water that entered was water that left. The primitive design accidentally promoted sanitation that sophisticated ships lacked. Here is what truly separated pirates from naval crews. Royal Navy vessels patrolled for months. They followed assigned routes. They could not anchor whenever crews needed relief. Discipline required continuous voyaging. Discipline was enforced with the lash. Pirates operated differently. They were raiders. They sailed from bases like Nassau, Tortuga, Madagascar. They struck quickly, captured prizes, returned to port to spend plunder. Typical pirate cruises lasted weeks, not months. And pirates could beach their ships almost anywhere. A pirate sloop drew perhaps 6 feet of water. It could nose into coves that would ground a naval frigate. Caribbean islands offered countless beaches where crews could land and do something that transformed shipboard sanitation entirely. They could relieve themselves on land. Soil absorbs waste. Bacteria break it down. The biological burden of human existence disperses naturally when men walk on dirt instead of floating on water. Every port stop, every beaching, every landing party became a sanitation reset. The ship never had to be the only toilet because the ship was never far from shore. Accumulation reset. Think about what this means. A crew of 60 spends 3 weeks at sea. They produce roughly 1,200 pounds of waste. Almost all goes directly overboard through the heads. But some accumulates. In the bilge, in corners, in residue that builds despite best efforts. Then they make port. The crew disperses. Some head for taverns, some head for other entertainments. But everyone, at some point, uses facilities on land. Proper outhouses, bushes behind the docks, anywhere but the ship. For days the vessel sits largely empty. Fresh air circulates. Sun reaches places that were dark for weeks. Whatever biological burden remained dissipates. Then the crew returns, reprovisioned, refreshed. The cycle begins again, but it begins clean. The accumulation that would be deadly on longer voyages never reaches critical mass. This is why pirate cruises could be survived despite conditions that killed naval crews. Not better sanitation, shorter voyages, more frequent stops, lifestyles that prevented accumulation. Now for accidental genius that saved more pirate lives than any toilet. Freshwater spoils. Fill a wooden barrel with clean river water and wait 2 weeks. Wood absorbs moisture. Perfect conditions for bacteria. Algae blooms in darkness. Water turns cloudy, then green, then thick with organisms your stomach cannot handle. Sailors called it pond water. They drank it anyway because the alternative was dehydration, and they died from it. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery, diseases that entered through contaminated water barrels and spread through crews like wildfire. But pirates drank rum, not because they were alcoholics, though many certainly were, because rum lasted. Alcohol prevented bacterial growth. A barrel of rum tasted the same after 2 months as after 2 days. Grog, the mixture of rum and water, accomplished something remarkable. Alcohol killed pathogens in the water. Dilution prevented constant drunkenness. Sailors got hydration without disease. Pirates drank grog decades before Admiral Vernon made it official Navy policy in 1740. They mixed rum with whatever water they had, not knowing they were accidentally purifying it. Here is something that sounds like legend, but was documented practice. Pirates tested their rum with fire. The concern was dilution. Dishonest merchants watered down rum before selling. Ships' pursers might skim from rations and add water to cover theft. How could a sailor know if he was getting what he was owed? The test was simple. Brutal. Effective. Take a sample of rum. Mix in a few grains of gunpowder. Strike a spark. If the mixture caught fire, the rum was strong enough. At least 57% alcohol. What came to be called proof strength. The fire proved the rum had not been watered. If the mixture refused to burn, someone was cheating. And on a pirate ship, cheating meant consequences nobody wanted to face. Rum was not the only fermented provision. Beer was common aboard ships of all nations. Weak beer, barely alcoholic, served more as hydration than intoxication. But brewing required boiling water, which killed pathogens. Every barrel of ship's beer was accidentally pasteurized. Sour milk lasted longer than fresh. The acid environment inhibited bacteria. Sailors did not understand lactic acid fermentation, but they knew sour milk did not sicken them the way spoiled fresh milk did. Wine was standard in Mediterranean fleets. Vinegar was used for everything from food preservation to wound treatment. Both acidic enough to kill most bacteria on contact. Without understanding why, sailors assembled diets of fermented and acidified provisions that avoided contamination problems. They ate and drank things that could not harbor diseases that killed crews insisting on fresh provisions. Consider the contrast. 1750. A Royal Navy vessel of 60 guns sails from Portsmouth to the Caribbean. 500 men. Trained surgeon. Hospital bay with dedicated sick berths. Written regulations governing hygiene. Purpose-built heads with drainage systems designed by naval architects. Cholera hits the ship 2 weeks out. By Jamaica, 112 men are dead, another 80 too sick to work. Same year, a pirate sloop of 12 guns sails from Nassau with 60 men. No surgeon, no hospital bay, no regulations, just a wooden platform at the bow with gaps between the planks, rum barrels, and a crew that beaches the ship every few days. All 60 survive the cruise. The pirate vessel had worse facilities, worse medical care, worse everything that should have mattered, but shorter voyages, more frequent stops. A crew that accidentally avoided diseases coming from accumulated contamination in spoiled water. Something else worked in the pirates' favor. Pirate crews were democratic. Men voted on provisions, on destinations, on how long to stay at sea. If conditions became unbearable, crews could vote to make port. No captain could force them to continue voyages that were killing them. When food turned rancid, when water went green, when accumulation in the bilge became unbearable, pirates could choose to do something about it. They were not trapped on scheduled patrols, not bound by orders from distant admirals. Articles governing pirate ships often specified minimum food quality and the right to abandon voyages that endangered crews. Democratic protections accidentally became public health measures. Men who could vote themselves off diseased ships rarely had to die on them. None of this means pirates lived in sanitary paradise. They were filthy. Contemporary accounts describe pirate vessels as overwhelming in their stench. Lice were constant companions. Rats infested every ship. Men went weeks without changing clothes, months without proper bathing. Dental hygiene was non-existent. Skin diseases and fungal infections were endemic. The conditions would horrify any modern inspector. Pirates existed in permanent low-grade illness, fighting infections their immune systems managed through constant exposure. they simply avoided catastrophic epidemics that decimated longer voyages. Disease still killed pirates. Malaria took many in tropical waters. Yellow fever erupted periodically. Venereal diseases spread through every port. Life expectancy was measured in years, but they survived long enough to raid, long enough to spend plunder, long enough to choose when and where they would die, rather than rotting in hospital bays from diseases contracted because they had no choice but to keep sailing. The head at the bow became the head everywhere. When navies built proper facilities, they built them at the bow. When steamships replaced sails, terminology remained. When aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines were designed centuries later, bathrooms were still called heads. A design decision made to use wind direction, to use the ocean as disposal, to prevent waste from accumulating where men lived, became embedded in maritime language forever. Pirates squatting on those platforms, gripping bowsprits as waves crashed around them, never imagined they were establishing tradition. They were just surviving, avoiding falling overboard, making it through one more voyage without diseases that killed others. Their solution was elegant in simplicity. Do not contain the problem. Do not build elaborate management systems. Let waste fall into the ocean. Let the sea handle it. The best sanitation system is one that never lets waste accumulate. So the next time you see the word head on a bathroom door aboard any vessel, remember where it came from. Men balanced on slippery planks above churning waves, communal ropes serving as toilet paper, the liar scraping filth as punishment for dishonesty, rum accidentally saving more lives than any surgeon. Pirates did not conquer disease through superior medicine or advanced hygiene. They conquered it through simple engineering, through accidental chemistry, through short voyages and frequent stops, through designs that sent waste into the sea before it could become deadly. They were filthy. They smelled terrible. They lived in conditions that would be condemned as inhumane, but they survived. And in an age when ships were floating death traps, survival was victory enough. There you have it. The secret was not treasure or weapons or navigational skill. It was a wooden box with a hole, positioned at the bow over open water, and barrels of rum that accidentally purified everything they touched. Hit that like button if you will never look at a ship bathroom the same way again. Write in the comments what surprised you most. The communal tow rag? The liar's punishment? The gunpowder rum test? The waves that sent men overboard while they answered nature's call? And subscribe to Tales of High Seas. Otherwise, the ghost of a sailor who fell from the beakhead will haunt your bathroom forever. Every time you reach for toilet paper, you will remember that once men used the same wet rope as 60 other sailors. Every time you pour yourself a drink, you will wonder whether it would pass the gunpowder test. Just subscribe. Trust me, it is easier than explaining to a dead pirate why you have indoor plumbing and still complain about it. Fair winds and following seas.